Safe Diving in Freshwater by Peter Buzakot, performed by Dr. Frans Cronje. We were gearing up on a sunny spring day at our local dive quarry. I'd not dived for some months, and I recalled last year's DAN annual diving report, in which we had written a section about diving fatalities in quarries, lakes and dive parks. There are more than 150 of such sites, also known as scuba parks, in the United States and Canada and many other areas of the world. Most of them are fairly near population centers. In our review, we looked at the past 10 years and we found 47 deaths in dive parks, defined as any freshwater site deliberately placed as an attraction to entice divers. A further 63 deaths occurred at other freshwater sites, such as rivers and lakes. We excluded caves because cave diving is highly specialized. We then compared the two groups to identify safety issues we might warn the diving communities about. Although we didn't know where all the divers got their gear, we did know information about the 47 cases. Of these, 36 were wearing rented or borrowed equipment. The percentage was the same for freshwater diving fatalities both in and outside the parks, but it was much higher than for diving deaths in the sea, where we found that just 26% of divers who died were wearing unfamiliar equipment. Fatalities in parks peaked in May, which is spring for the Northern Hemisphere, and is early in the year than those at the other freshwater sites of the area. And we wondered if the timing might be the result of divers returning to diving after the winter. Maximum depths where divers died was significantly deeper in the parks, 23 versus 14 meters outside of the parks. And technical diving was also more common in the dive parks than other freshwater sites, 17 versus 6%, probably due to greater access to deeper points. Training was the purpose of the dive in 28 of the 110 freshwater deaths, that is 25%. The top 3 cases of death were drowning, cardiac problems, and arterial gas embolism, which is commonly also found in the sea. One thing that stood out, though, was that all 5 AGE events occurred in the dive parks. It was important to DAN researchers to figure out how to use these data to assist the diving community. So our next step was to look at our database of divers-supplied reports to help us better understand the causes of injuries and incidents. This incident report from the dive park contains several common elements. I accompanied a class of students on a dive in a quarry. We visited a helicopter in water deeper than 18 meters. Once the class had performed the exercises, my buddy led the way from the chopper to an underwater boat. The instructor and students followed at a distance. When we arrived at the boat, which was about 12 meters, we stopped and turned around. We stopped and turned around. Unknown to us, about 9 meters away, a diver in the class began to experience difficulty breathing through his regulator, and he quickly became low on air. He looked at his pressure gauge and saw that the pressure dropped to 0 with each difficult breath. I did not see him since he was coming down at an angle, and I was facing away from him. My buddy handed the diver a spare air supply twice, and he let go of it and looked panicked. Fortunately, staying calm saved the day in this case, and both divers surfaced unharmed. However, this incident should remind us to regularly check our gas supply, especially when the dives are deeper than usual. This incident also includes common elements, such as a diver in training who dives more deeply than usual, who is then at risk of making a panic descent, which is a well-established risk in AGE deaths. On average, 11 divers die every year in fresh water in the United States and Canada alone. Almost half of these deaths occur in parks, which are typically deeper than other freshwater dive sites. Technical diving is more common in the dive park deaths than those outside the parks. Training was the purpose of dives in 25% of the fatalities. Unfamiliar gear was a hazard for all divers. It may be more common at freshwater sites where training is popular. DAN recommends that divers take a few minutes before diving to become familiar with any new, borrowed or rented equipment. Check it carefully before entering the water, and when possible, try it in water shallow enough to stand up in before going deeper. In particular, familiarize yourself with the buoyancy control and emergency weight removal systems. which vary amongst manufacturers. Given that buoyancy problems and rapid ascents are linked to the risk of arterial gas embolism, Dan recommends that divers try to avoid blue water ascents when possible. In dive parks, this may mean following an old quarry road away from shore and then back again at the end of the dive, or to use an ascent line and buoy for a reference. If you must surface in open water, consider deploying a surface marker buoy connected to a reel and locking the reel and using the line as a reference. Based on the types of incidents most often submitted to Dan's online reporting system, divers should remember to check the remaining gas supply regularly. Remember, Dan's top 3 tips for safe diving in freshwater are: dive with familiar gear, avoid blue water ascents, and keep an eye on your gas gauge.